Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something really fascinating: when attention stops evaporating, AI, neuroscience, and preserving thought. We're looking at this deeply compelling neurocognitive study that asks a pretty simple yet absolutely profound question. What actually happens to our brains when we stop letting our attention just evaporate? We're going to explore how we can use artificial intelligence not to think for us, no way, but as a tool to catch our own thoughts. Now, before we really get going, it helps to understand what we mean by cognitive exhaust. Because every single day, your brain naturally produces these brilliant insights, deep feelings, and super complex memories. That right there, that's your cognitive exhaust. And today, we're going to see exactly what happens when you proactively catch it before it disappears into thin air. Let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. The problem of evaporating thoughts, 2. AI as a thought catcher, 3. Rewiring the brain's pathways, 4. The crucial human witness, and finally, 5. Mapping your future self. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The problem of evaporating thoughts. Where do they actually go? It's a completely universal frustration. Have you ever had a truly brilliant insight, a really deep feeling, or a complex memory pop up, only to lose it the very second a conversation ends or you walk into another room? It's literally the worst, right? It's like the thought was perfectly clear in your mind, but the exact moment you stopped actively holding on to it, it just vanished, poof. So where do those thoughts actually go when you stop actively thinking them? Well, in our normal internal mind, thoughts fade incredibly quickly. When we try to recall them hours or even days later, we have to rely on reconstructive memory to try and put those pieces back together. And let's be honest, that's often foggy, fragmented, or totally colored by whatever mood we just happen to be in at that moment. But compare that to an externalized archive. Here, thoughts are captured in real time and become a revisitable trace. You don't have to rebuild the thought from scratch and just hope you remember the exact nuance. The entire path you took to get there is saved, preserved exactly as it was when the thought was fresh. The source material actually features this brilliant section called the Angela Explainer, which the author wrote specifically for his child, and he uses this highly accessible, honestly perfect metaphor. He says, imagine your brain is a super busy popcorn machine. Most people eat a few pieces, drop a bunch on the floor, forget where the bowl is. And it's so true. Our brains are constantly popping out these little kernels of insight, salience, and meaning. We might hold on to 1 or 2 of them to use in an immediate conversation, but without a dedicated bucket to catch the rest, we just let them fall to the floor and eventually sweep them away. So, moving on to Section 2, AI as a thought catcher, specifically the Rosetta method. Let's look at the actual mechanics of catching all that cognitive popcorn. Over an 18-month period of really intense daily practice, the author utilized something called the Rosetta method. This is a specific workflow using ChatGPT. It always starts with step 1, internal pressure. Now, this isn't just a fleeting idea. It's a strongly felt sense, a real emotional weight or a complex memory that is just demanding articulation. You feel the pressure to get it out of your head. Step 2 introduces AI as a translation layer to help externalize that pressure into words rapidly. By speaking or typing raw, messy, unedited thoughts, the AI organizes the chaos. And that leads to step 3, the creation of a saved artifact, like a structured document, an outline, or an audio file. Finally, step 4 ensures that this artifact doesn't just sit and collect digital dust on a hard drive. It is intentionally shared with a human witness. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is that the AI is not the thinker. It is simply a low-friction externalization surface. The attention, the profound focus, the theology, the therapy, the lived experience, all of that strictly belongs to the human. The AI didn't create the author's intense focus, and it definitely didn't generate the emotional gravity of the ideas. It merely provided a frictionless pipe, so to speak, so that the cognitive exhaust of that intense focus didn't evaporate into thin air before it could be written down. Which brings us to Section 3, rewiring the brain's pathways. Let's talk about cognitive ecology. So, what actually happens to your biological brain when you practice this looping method every day for 18 months? Well, you develop an incredibly high resolution of something called metacognitive monitoring. By constantly catching your thoughts and putting them into this interface, you are repeatedly observing your own brain building its ideas. You aren't just thinking anymore, you are actually watching yourself think. It's wild. You begin to notice the really subtle difference between a thought that is fully formed and one that is just, a vague feeling that needs a better name. You're effectively training your mind with a live, real-time error detection layer, becoming hyper-aware of your own cognitive habits. You also experience something called semantic network densification. Now, this is basically the way our brain builds a web of interconnected ideas. By repeatedly articulating concepts, the user naturally links completely different domains, things like therapy, theology, family stories, and AI. Now, it doesn't do this by pretending these things are exactly the same. Instead, it recognizes that they share a structural spine. You begin to find these deep analogies that act as sturdy bridges between completely different areas of your life, making your overall understanding of the world so much denser and more unified. Over time, this daily practice makes the brain far more efficient, acting as a true catalyst for cognitive transformation. The gap between feeling a pressure and actually articulating it shrinks, leading to much faster thought-to-language translation. You also develop stronger conceptual compression, which basically means you can pack really big ideas into tighter, much more impactful sentences. And because you have these well-worn paths in your brain, you gain a much more flexible ability to explain complex concepts across entirely different audiences. Whether you're speaking to a specialized therapist, a priest, or even just translating a dense idea for a young child, you leave much clearer tracks from that initial internal feeling to an explicit, understandable structure.
All right, moving into section 4, the crucial human witness, testing the trace.
The source material leans heavily on narrative therapy here, pulling from the work of Michael White, who states, when the problem is externalized, the person is not only freed from the problem-saturated description of their identity, but they are also in a position to exert a new and more effective agency. This is a real game changer. By turning internal cognitive pressure into a saved physical artifact, a person no longer has to carry the burden entirely inside themselves. They can literally put it on the table, look at it objectively, and begin to reshape it. Through this reauthoring process, having an external artifact allows an individual to approach painful or fragmented memories gradually and safely. The author specifically notes how incredibly valuable this methodology is for populations like veterans. Instead of having to reconstruct a massive, overwhelming emotional burden live in a therapy room, which, let's face it, can be incredibly daunting, they can bring a trace, they can bring a document, a curated playlist, or a generated image, and approach their history step by step, safely reauthoring their dominant narrative. But here is exactly why the AI remains strictly a tool and not a replacement. In narrative practice, the person seeking consultation is the expert on their own life, absolutely, but they still desperately need the community. AI simply cannot replace a therapist, a priest, or a family member. Human witnesses provide the relational response, the interpretation, the forgiveness, the accountability, the genuine love that actually gives the saved artifact its true meaning and weight in the real world. Ultimately, there's a very clear boundary here. Artificial intelligence, it's a fast notebook for making the map. The human witnesses, they are the guides who ensure the map actually helps you get home. The technology helps produce the trace with minimal friction for sure, but it is the real-world community that tests it, challenges it, and ultimately embraces it. Finally, we arrive at section 5, mapping your future self. The autobiographical loop. By saving your thoughts as artifacts over time, you actively participate in what's called autobiographical integration. Now, you aren't freezing yourself in time or trapping yourself in an old opinion. Rather, you are leaving breadcrumbs. When you externalize your thoughts, you get to see exactly how you've changed, grown, and adapted. You can literally pull up a thought you had 6 months or 2 years ago and physically see the path your brain took to arrive at where you are today, seamlessly connecting your past, your present, and your anticipated future. The author uses another really helpful, child-accessible analogy here to explain this compounding value. The archive of all these artifacts is not some dusty storage box where ideas go to die. No, it's a playground. It's kind of like building a massive, persistent Minecraft world for your own brain. Every time you return to an old thought, the path to that thought becomes easier to walk again. You don't have to start from scratch. You just pick up right where you left off in the world you've already built. There is a truly profound cognitive ecology at play here. This externalized environment acts as extended cognition. It literally modifies future accessibility landscapes, meaning it actually changes what thoughts and ideas are organically reachable to you tomorrow, based entirely on the structures you take the time to save today. It offloads cognitive demand, so your biological brain isn't doing all the heavy lifting, functioning as a super reliable scaffold for re-entry and reconsolidation whenever you need to revisit a really complex topic. As the source material says perfectly, the brain learns the path because you keep walking it. Ultimately, it's not about the machine being smart.
It's about the human mind repeatedly, day in and day out, practicing the route from a vague internal feeling to a highly structured, shareable insight.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a provocative thought about your own attention. You have brilliant insights, deep feelings, and vital memories popping up every single day. So, what are you doing with your own cognitive exhaust? Will you let it just evaporate into the air, or will you find a way to catch it?